go ahead and do it. No one's watching. This is all. I'm treating all of this as practice for like when we actually get popular. So it's all good.
I'm feeling the exact same way.
Yeah. So like if we're like mid talk, we're like, hold on a second, I just want to check if this sound is working. Like, who cares? Our production value doesn't have to be perfect. We'll have time to perfect that when we are standing atop the mountain of D&D podcasts. People will say Critical Who. Actually, they'll probably still say Critical Role is still top. But that's okay. We can be in the conversation.
Comparing
we'll
this.
have time to perfect that.
I
heard myself.
All right, so it's definitely picking up Discord audio. Let's see, desktop, Discord audio. You're coming in loud.
I can. Let me see.
I'm gonna lower it a little bit. All right, go ahead and start talking.
Check. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everyone's just trying to stay alive. Ha 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 ha. Good. No.
All right, keep going.
I don't know any more lyrics of that song, so. Let me see.
It could also just be my phone. Fuck it.
Possibly.
Fuck it. All right, go ahead and start talking. All right, so we've got audio. It looks like it's working. It's picking up all the shit that we're doing. So I guess, do you want to bullshit for a little bit longer, or are you going to jump in?
Whatever you want to do, man. I'm cool. I'm cool to do whatever. I'm just chilling. So I was actually gonna work on some more maps for villages and towns in the region, just to have them prepared for when and if you guys go there. So I was doing that and then prepping some more story stuff for Wednesday night.
Okay. Fuck it. Let's do it.
Are you doing all the intro stuff?
Yeah, I guess so.
Word.
We'll go ahead and just start it up, I guess. So, all right, everybody. I'm here with DM Chris for
Hey
the
guys.
Kareborum. We haven't really come up with a name yet for it, but right now I guess we're just calling it Kareborum RiverQuest Games Act 2.
So I had an idea for that we could actually, not to interrupt your flow of introduction, but if we wanted to debut that tonight on the stream, a potential name at least for the campaign that I thought of while camping, I'll be happy to share that with our dedicated listeners.
Let's make it an official announcement when we have the actual name.
Sounds good.
Talk to the group, see what they think. If we can ever get everybody to agree on a day and time. So I'm here with Chris, the DM for our seasonal conquests. Unfortunately, most of our group are out and taking care of other things that they have to take care of tonight. But that's the whole point of Downstream is, whoever can fill in and talk and hang out and go over stuff. Let's just throw them in and see what we can come up with.
Oh yeah.
It's myself, Scott Lomar. I play the Vidalcan wizard, and then DM Chris, who is omnipotent and runs everything else. So we're just gonna kind of go through some of his preparations and the things that he does as a DM and the things that he views the game from, because as players we look at it one way, as a DM he looks at it an entirely different way. So I kind of want to pick his brain a little bit more about that, and then kind of just see what he has to say and see how he feels about things. So we'll get right to it.
Excited to talk about it tonight. Excited to maybe peel the curtain back a little bit on the first 6 episodes or 12 hours that we've played so far. So yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Just to let everybody know also that this week is going to be a little bit of an off week. We're going to be streaming on Wednesday as opposed to Friday because myself and Zlatan/Sam, we have a real world work commitment that we have to do, which also segues into we're pretty much going to be aiming for a reschedule for the month of August. We haven't really come to a firm time just yet, but as of this week, we're going to be doing it Wednesday, and we're going to see what we can get the group together for in the coming weeks. I'd rather not take a long hiatus, but sometimes, as this is not our primary source of income, we got to do what we got to do to make money.
Mm-hmm. True story.
So Wednesday night, 7 o'clock or
30,
7:30? 7:30.
7:30.
7:30, we're gonna start rolling dice. The stream will be live, and we're hard stopping at 9:30. So come join us on Wednesday as opposed to Friday. So without further ado, I'm gonna just jump right in. First off, how are you feeling so far as the DM of RiverQuest Games? Flagship show, Kareborum, to be named later.
To be named later, yeah. That's the theme, I think. I'm really happy so far. Like I'm having a really good time. I hope all the players are. I'm enjoying where the story is going, even when it goes down and around corners and alleyways that I'm not expecting it to go down. Or characters doing things that are totally within character that make me have to change things on the fly. However, very happy. Top three things. Very happy with how the group is coming together, both players and characters, and starting to feel more comfortable. Just kind of showing their, I guess you call it your personal side, your more vulnerable side, as characters are starting to reveal little bits about their backstory and are starting to peel back some of the layers of their exterior armor. Um, Also, kind of we'll just since we're doing top three, these are in no particular order necessarily, but number two, really happy with how our players are sticking to their characters. I've really been impressed with people sticking with characters, even like table talk, and you go back and listen to the VODs, which I do to take notes because this is such a blessing to have audio and video recording of what we're playing. Because as a DM, I often will get lost in what we're doing and be like totally tied into something you guys are saying, or like a vignette you're explaining, or the combat, or whatever it is, and I just forget to write stuff down. And I'm just like, oh man, this is awesome! Like this is so cool. So it's nice to go back and watch those videos, but it's cool to see people around the table even be like, I know that this is not the like most logical thing to do, but my character would definitely do it. Like Bruce in the last episode being totally, dock workery, longshoreman, like, oh, I'm taller than you. I'm gonna make fun of you and hold this coin purse above your head. I don't care how dangerous it is. Like I thought that was great because people could have really easily metagamed that and been like, well, there's this guy in the bar that's sitting there in the corner. I don't want to mess with him. But I've been really happy with how players have stuck to character and character development, which has been really cool. Um, and the last thing that I'm super excited about with our players so far is just their a willingness to kind of go where the story leads them without like what's the word I'm looking for? Without creating any type of group burden. So like people are doing a really good job of playing into the story while still writing their own story. I hope that makes sense. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, that makes plenty of sense. And so one quick addendum to add on to the things that we were talking about. You may have also noticed that we were not live this past Friday. Too many people were out of town, so we weren't able to stream. So this is not a recap of what we did this past Friday. So what we're recapping is from the previous episode, the Friday before. So some of it may sound very, wait a second, I thought that already happened. What's going on? That's why. So just want to bring that back to everybody who's listening. But also, along that same line of like people staying a character and, not collectively story or the group collectively storytelling and keeping that thing going forward. As a DM, are you more open to us just being like, hey, figure it out? You guys are gonna be all part of it? Are you gonna try to like kind of push us in a direction, try to open and peel back those layers, or are you just gonna let it all happen organically? Or in more not, are you gonna let it happen more? Is that your preferred style?
I think that as a DM, I want to try to walk the line there between both of those. I think there's instances. I'm trying to think of one that we've had so far in the game, but one like there are instances where I think it's more beneficial to the story for me to step in and like, place some type of Deus Ex Machina or very obvious clue or whatever in the path of your travels or adventures so that you can get to that next, I don't know, big breadcrumb or maybe even like the kind of conclusion to something. But there's also really important story parts that you guys are just going to have to find that they aren't going to necessarily be super clear, and it'll kind of shape the way that the story unfolds. If you find them, when you find them, how you find them, things like that. So I think that the goal that I have for myself is to sort of walk the line between those two. Like, struggling to find answers is an important part of the game for players, so that like the puzzles and things aren't always like literal puzzles, but you're actually trying to figure out something. Um, and I think it's also important that the opposite is avoided as well. Like, I wouldn't want to be a player who's really struggling to figure something out to get the story progressed, and the DM just sits there and says like, well, we'll figure it out. It's like, well, the answer isn't always as clear to the players, often because of DM error. Like, I may not have described something I thought I described 3 episodes ago to somebody. Like, you've got to kind of know how to balance that out so that you keep people engaged, as well as keep your players like wanting to solve the problem. Because, like, let's be real, we all get to a point where we're working on something, working on a problem, working on an issue, and we just go, dude, fuck this. I'm not putting any more time into it. I'm gonna go do something else. I'm gonna go become like a pirate king, or I'm gonna go open an inn in town and never go adventure again because I'm stuck. You know what I mean? Like, you can get bogged down in that.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the biggest things that we try to avoid, uh, is bogging things down with
Hmm.
jumping around, going, well, I'm going to go do my own thing and whatnot. So to that point of the DM, having that information and maybe not explaining it well enough or not, would you, as a DM, let a major story component or a major arc fizzle because of a missed uh, breadcrumb, as you called it? Like, if we didn't pick up on this one piece, like I'm laying it down pretty thick and we're just pretty stupid and not picking up on it, would you kind of just be like, well, you try to walk down the street and the guards turn you around and blah blah blah, just to kind of push people in that direction, or would you be like, well, that entire arc is gone?
It depends on the arc. Like, it depends on the breadcrumbs you're already following. I think, to kind of expand on that, if you guys were following, or were following like the main arc of the story, and we can call it like the main quest or whatever, I would probably be more apt to leave additional breadcrumbs. Um, but the nice thing about being the DM is that it's kind of like being an actor. If you mess up your lines, nobody knows. So if you guys don't see a clue, and maybe that clue's an NPC, then maybe there's another NPC that has the same clue, but it's a different name in a different place, and you guys would never have known that switch occurred. Same thing for like items found on people or places. Like, those items can be anywhere. I just have to decide how and when I get those things into the path that you're adventuring. So I think more of it is like to kind of pull the curtain back on our own campaign. Like, I've got people, things, events that I know I want to occur in a certain order. And I kind of just plug them in when it fits, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so
Like,
they
there's,
don't. There's no set timeline. There's no set on the fifth day this person's gonna show up. It's, well, we went to this town instead, and so now we're killing time over there. They show up there as opposed to, well, they'll never show up because they weren't in the right place at the right time. Am I
yeah,
understanding correctly?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like, it wouldn't make sense. Like, for example, if I wanted to, and this is not our storyline at all, so this is no spoilers, no pulling back too much of the curtain or revealing things that could have happened or would happen or whatever, however you want to think about it. So just to put that out there, I don't want anybody thinking that this is what's going to happen next week, or on Wednesday. Excuse me. Uh, like, let's say for example there was a major story NPC that was in Taran, and you guys decided not to go there, and you're leaving and going the other direction. I wouldn't just be like, well, I guess they'll never meet. There goes my story. Like, you take the breadcrumb and you move it to another part. Like, there's exceptions to that, of course. Like, if someone told you that somebody was in a town or somewhere, but there's ways around that. Like, that's the beauty of this kind of combined storytelling, and is that we can all sort of fudge things around together, and I can use other little pieces of the puzzle to guide you back towards that person or back towards somebody who, you know, also requires you to go there. Like, it's kind of like economics. You kind of just keep incentivizing people until they do the thing you want them to do.
Well, and then also, it's not just necessarily. It's actually more reminiscent of a non-static world, right? Because we're not playing a video game. We're not. it's not once you trigger this, then this event happens, right? Like
Mhm.
in a evolving realistic scenario, like I could be like, oh, my DM Chris, he's down here in Richmond, but like the past 3 days you've been out camping, right? Like
Mhm.
people move around, people go from town to town, especially in the areas in which we've seen so far. Not everything's relatively close, right? A half a day's journey, maybe a day's journey away, right? So
Yeah. So
it would be fair to say like, oh, that person you're gonna meet is in Terran, and
mhm.
then we get to the far, and it's like, oh, you were supposed to be in Terran. It's like, well, I left there because I needed to whatever. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I
Like
traveled to town.
exactly. So having it not static, I think, is definitely a for the DM's sanity way more safe because then it's like, okay, well, I'll just put this person in here, and like you said, who knows? We wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's key to it too. And just to kind of touch on what you were describing with the distances, just so that people do know why they're that far away. Like, I modeled Kareborum demographically, especially like the patterns of settlement. So cities, towns, villages, hamlets, all the way, from top to bottom of that kind of pyramid, if you want to call it that. That's based on sort of the high Middle Ages of England, where you would have all these settlements that were no more than a day apart, where villages fed into towns, towns fed into cities, hamlets surrounded larger villages, but really the big three are, especially in a simplified version, which we are going to be using in our world, are cities, towns, and villages. They all work together. They're never more than a day away from each other. Because if you're heading to town to sell stuff, you don't want to have to spend too much time on the road. And 1 day is about all your food would last if you're a farmer, anyways.
That's very interesting. I am not a huge history person. I am not a huge civil engineer, so I am not really down with all of that understanding and knowledge of that. So that's actually really cool to hear because
Yeah.
I would never have thought that way.
And
So go
that's
ahead.
actually what gave rise to the you guys haven't been to one yet, but I'm guessing that at some point you guys will. Um, the Travelers Guild, that is
Oh,
part of the world of Kareborum. That's what gave rise to that, was because when I was making my maps, I kind of just dotted around all the villages and towns and stuff, and the two cities that make up the two major, kind of hubs of Dragonhearth. And I realized there was lots of places where there was more than a day's travel between a village or a town or whatever. And I was like, oh well, I don't want to put another village there because it doesn't make sense to this, settlement pattern where you would basically have, 3 villages per town. Like, that's the max amount of individuals that you could probably support on an economy in a village, and then that economy in the village helping to sustain the economy of the town. So I was like with these dead spaces, and I was like, well, oh shit, let's do this. How about there's this whole other little mini economy, these goblins that run the Strangers Guild, like, so that's kind of where that all came from.
very cool. And that's actually a very perfect segue into one of the things I wanted to talk with you about because we started in Kareborum, God, back in 2018
A long time
after
ago.
gender reveal party, and then that
Hmm.
campaign died out, and you kept working on the story. But one of the things we never really ever talked about or got to was inspiration. Like you started working on this long before we started playing,
Hmm.
even in 2018. So like what was it? Was it you were just one day being like, "Man, I've got this city idea," or was it like did you have a lightning strike moment where it's like, "I've got this whole story that I want to tell."
Honestly, I think it was the second one. I think it was really more of the lightning strike. Like, I kind of sat down one day, and this was after, like, talking to you guys about playing D&D and getting really into like reading up on it, and then starting to watch, different, shows on YouTube. Like, it took a lot longer than I would nowadays expect to find like Critical Role. Like, I started with I mean, it's the people who are now Critical Role, but like when they were on Geek and Sundry doing like Greyhawk and a couple of other ones from like forever ago. I was watching those and getting into stuff and being like, man, this is really cool. And then I started just sort of thinking about the story, and it was, I think I remember telling you about it, like, so I'm a teacher for those of you that don't know me personally. And it was like the end of the school year I actually looked this at this the other day. It was in a notebook that I still have up here in the office. It was 2016 that I wrote the original sort of story outline that was going to be the basis for the first campaign. It was the War of the Giant Kings. Was going to be that one, and started writing all that story out. And I think I remember even telling you, like, over a couple of days while students were taking final exams and I was just proctoring, so I had a lot of downtime between classes because the days are shorter. I think I wrote, like, in a small notebook, something like 200 pages of story, which ended up not being used and actually was detrimental to the TMing of that campaign because it burned me out. But it was in that lightning strike moment that I found Braljana. And I really did just sit down and just start making stuff up and, drawing maps. And, I used the old ketchup in the napkin technique to get my world map. I just squirted a bunch of ketchup in a paper towel and smushed it together and opened it up and then drew what I saw and then went upstairs and made a map of it in. Oh no, this was even before Incarnate. I still have all the original hand-drawn maps for Brojana somewhere around here. I have to go find them. But yeah, man, it was just a lightning strike, to be honest. Like, I wish I could say that, I sat around for a long time building out little pieces of things, or, starting with small ideas and working bigger from there. But it was definitely just, I've got this idea, I've got this world in my head, I'm gonna just start writing it all down. And then once I started, it just kind of hasn't stopped.
That is awesome. And I do remember you telling me about the day sitting down writing all the 200 pages during the testing, and I remember
Mhm.
giving you a hard time about it, but honestly, so for those of you who are listening in the future, it's 2021 right now. So that was 5 years ago
Yeah.
that he's been working on this. So that is
Mhm.
outstanding. Just to be able to stick with it and then to also have cropped it and not recreated it, but tailored it and finding, like you said, Browdrana in it and being able to move from that and just not get hung up on the one story. I think that's it's the mark of a good DM, a good storyteller, a good writer, all of that. So
I
that
appreciate it.
that is true. Uh-oh. I see you over there, Fuzzy Knuckles.
No,
Little
Fuzzy.
Fuzzy's in the audience. Well,
Hey, there he is.
hello.
What's up, Fuzzy Knuckles?
Hey.
Whoa, that is loud.
Yeah, let me go grab my mic. I'm cleaning and I forgot we were talking about doing this tonight. Let me go grab my proper mic. Hold on.
Classic Fuzzy Knuckles.
All right. Well, we've
Old
got
Fuzzy Knuckles, forgetting what we're doing.
Old Fuzzy Knuckles.
he's off trying to piece together the disappearance of the HMS Jackie Daytona.
Yep, the HMS Jackie Daytona.
Okay, so while he's looking for his mic, let me go ahead and hit you with a couple more questions that I had for you, and then we can kind of pivot and do more of a group talk.
Sure.
As a DM, when people throw, I'm gonna bash this NPC in the head with a hammer. No spoilers, it happens. How do you react? Do you have like things in your pocket ready to be like, all right, well, okay, or is it just like, all right, I'm gonna need a couple minutes here while I figure all this out?
I mean, luckily there's so much, like, there are so many resources now available for DMs to have things ready. And even just like common stat blocks. So, like, part of it, I guess, is which NPC you attack. Like, you know, if you attack a storyline character, somebody who is actually, important to the story arc or who is important to the progression of the story, like, yeah, I've got a stat block for them. I've got, all the personality things, 3 sentences, not like paragraphs or anything like that, like 3 quick sentences to talk about their demeanor, their accent, and their physical appearance. And then stat blocks for if you guys fight. So that's all prepared for major NPCs. If it's a just random person, like if you guys decide to descend down the path of, the the murder hobos, that I don't think you guys are or will go down that path, but we'll see. Then sometimes, yeah, you can get caught off guard as a DM when people just start stabbing people, and you gotta kind of think on your feet. So generally, if that stuff starts to happen, I just start to make the NPCs really just like squishy in hopes that you get bored doing that. Like, because if you just jump a random person in a town and you're a either magic wielding or, sword or weapon wielding adventurer, your odds are you're gonna beat the crap out of them. But you never know. You never know what level that NPC is that you're about to attack.
Gotcha. So I just want to
watch
ask one
out.
more question, and then we'll swing around and we'll make it a group talk. Voices. You are the king of voices. You and Telvari and Bayless are awesome at just coming up with voices either on the fly or prepared. And you kind of hinted at it when you said the three sentence. So all of your NPC voices are chosen in advance, or is it just what you feel in the moment?
I mean, both. So like they are very general notes. And I appreciate your very kind words about my accents, but they're all pretty much the same accent, just in varying pitches and speed of speaking. Because I'm definitely not like a professional voice actor or anything like that.
All are.
Yeah, sure. So like my major NPCs, they do have notes about their accent. Sometimes there's little quirks about their accent. Like kind of like any story that or DMing that folks would do. Like the more important an NPC is, the more time you're going to spend kind of writing stuff about them and thinking about them and things like that. So some of those have more detailed voices. A lot of the times, though, to be honest, it's just random. It's whatever pops in my head, kind of as I'm seeing the story, in my mind's eye as it's playing out. I think of the physical description of this person and then imagine what they would sound like, and that's what pops out. Sometimes it matches, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's shit. It's just it is what it is.
Well, as somebody whose characters all tend to have the same voice as myself, I appreciate the different NPC accents and voices that come along with it because it's not something that I'm very good at or capable of. Or if I do it, it comes out as you described as shit. So,
Mine definitely range, so I feel your pain. And then I forget them sometimes. So sometimes NPCs have different voices, which is always fun to try to go back on VODs and you hear someone speaking in two different accents and you're like, oh, good. Glad that I didn't stick to that.
Well, and then we also have those that start with an accent and then it ends up being Australian.
And then then swing in mid sentence.
So, all right, fun. Well, I was just planning on, hounding you as a DM, but now that we've got Fuzzy Knuckles in the group, we can maybe switch it up a little bit and maybe just kind of talk a little bit more. So let's go ahead and bring him into the fray. Fuzzy Knuckles, how you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing some chores right now. I actually was watching Harmontown doing D&D, and then was catching up with an old friend who messaged me about a fun old memory, and I was telling them to check out our D&D session, and then when I linked the YouTube video, I saw that it said live now, and I was like, oh shit, that's right. We talked about doing that tonight. So then I ran down and grabbed my laptop, and now here I am, still folding clothes and doing this.
Well, I think that kind of falls on myself and Chris and just overall because the mediums for communication we just don't have enough of. I mean, if we had a Discord chat or a text message or email, anything that we could send voice messages.
I wouldn't put any blame on anybody. It's just we didn't do it. We didn't do the D&D this week, so I didn't even think about it.
But we did text and talk in Discord about it. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. It's neither here nor there. Anyway, so you're doing some chores, huh? So let me go ahead and ask you, because I don't think the first Downstream was the only one you've been in thus far, right? So we didn't really get to talk much about Fuzzy Knuckles because you were in a different character than Fuzzy Knuckles at the time. Where did the inspiration for Fuzzy Knuckles come from? Kind of give us a little bit of don't peel too much back about his backstory, but give us more of your mentality and your thought process in creating this character.
My thought process was I listened to the podcast That Happens, and I really liked the character that Jeff Brian Davis played, so I stole that character and made it my own.
So he plays a cat pirate.
Yeah, he plays a swashbuckler tabaxi named Francisco Fuzzy Knuckles de Quevedo.
I've never seen that.
I said that at the beginning, that it was a straight rip-off of a character.
Oh, gotcha. So not a lot of personal investment. I see. So I have played other games with you, and I have, spent time rolling dice with you, and you had some interesting characters. So do you have other characters that you've poured like thought process into? Like, what's the process you get into when playing a character?
I mean, what I said was mostly in jest, but he really did have a backstory that was different. I just like the archetype that Jeff Davis's character had. Plus, I really like the idea. I've never played a Tabaxi, so I really wanted to play a Tabaxi. Be a little sneaky kid cat. It sounds like a lot of fun. But my general way of creating a character, in the beginning, in the beginning, I came down. No, it used to be like, trying to min-max a character and trying to, for lack of better words, win the game. And then after, your fourth or fifth character, you realize that's not what the game is about. The way that I would make my characters would be, I would have a personality in mind, and I would come up with a character. Like, let's say, let's just take stop it, Fuzzy Knuckles out of this and go to my previous character, Anton. I came up with the backstory and what I wanted the backstory to be and what his goal to be, and then I created a character around that. Probably one of my favorite characters I've ever made, but on paper, he sounds super hampered by his backstory, but in reality, he ended up being ridiculously awesome because his backstory, which he might come into play if Fuzzy Knuckles dies at any point during this campaign. He's my next quickly made character around this level. He was a half-elf fighter who was raised by humans on a farm, and they just didn't like elves. They were trying to hide his elven ancestry and just raise him around humans and non-magic folk and just can't think of the right word. Ignore all of that. But then he found out about his ancestry and wants to, dive into the elven side of his family and finds out that he might have magic in him. And then he tries to learn that magic, but messes up and shrinks down to a third of his size. So for all purposes, treat him as a halfling, but he actually is a half-elf. And that sounds like it could be really crap for him. But it actually ended up being really cool because then I was able to do him as a fighter because he never actually learned magic. But then there's a fighter subclass of Eldritch Knight, which fits perfectly into his backstory. And he became this ridiculously awesome, tanky, really cool guy. So I was really happy with that. And it's a very, very, very long way of saying I create a character's backstory and then develop a character sheet around that.
Okay, so that's definitely what I wanted to kind of touch upon is, so with you it's the backstory that creates the character versus like the class or the race. Because I know I'm definitely the type of person that's like, I don't like playing martial classes because they are fairly limited and not as exciting to play, and like having the different things that they can do. So I generally try to pick a class that has depth or different things that they can do. So like a wizard can cast different types of spells, and with Lomar being a chronomancer, he can manipulate time versus just the guy that's like, well, I've got this sword and I've got this hammer and I'm gonna swing it, and that's what I do. So it's definitely interesting to hear about your process in that you have the backstory first, and then that fills in the blanks for the class, the race, and everything else, which is a really cool way of doing it.
I mean, the martial archetypes, they really only are limited by, is a really cheesy way to say it, but your imagination. Like, sure, you might be limited to my guy can only stab him, but, how are you going to go about stabbing him? like with my fighter archetype, who's an Eldritch Knight, he was a martial, but he couldn't do much damage. But his whole personality was trying to protect the group. So that informed a lot of the decisions he made. And yeah, he was pretty limited on what he could and couldn't do, but he had a lot of options in his realm of defender. Whereas Fuzzy Knuckles is completely and totally stealth based. Like if you hit him once, he's probably going to go down. He's not that strong. But the problem is actually hitting him and seeing him to hit him, or getting into a fight in the first place because his charisma is so high. And then you compare that to one of my other guys, my barbarian, who just didn't give a shit about anything and charged in, hatchet swinging, no matter what the circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the tactics and there's the different backgrounds and, bonds and reasons for the character's existence that changed how the character is played. But just in terms of like an action economy and the different choices that they can make in terms of what they can do in a combat, to me, martial characters just don't. They're not fun for me because it's just such a limited.
It's more boring. Casters are a lot more involved. You're right.
Yep, and it's not a criticism or anything like that. It's just that my personal play style is not towards just swinging a sword. It gets boring to me. What about you, Chris? When you ever come back to the player side of the table, how do you go about making your characters?
I actually do the same thing that Andrew does. I'm a story first, and then I let the character kind of go from there. Like, there's a character that I have ready as a DM PC that you guys might meet at some point. I'm still not sure if the story will take you that way. But they are a Circle of the Shepherd Druid who's really fun in my mind. But it all started with his backstory, and then from there I built the character, around how I envisioned him from that story.
Okay, so you're the background first, then build the character from there.
Yeah, for sure. Like I don't care if my character is not powerful or is, whatever. Like they could even be a hindrance on the party. Like hopefully, if this character in whatever world that we're playing in decides to go adventuring, hopefully at some point they get the chance to, to prove themselves. You never know.
Well, kind of going off what you said, I don't think it's ever really, unless you just have like the absolute worst roles, there's never really a hindrance. You just have to figure out what your character is good at, and then build off of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So let me kind of throw something back at you about being a hindrance to the party. So when you say hindrance, you mean more of like a mechanical hindrance, or do you mean a storytelling hindrance?
Probably more mechanical. Like I wouldn't, just because I don't think I'd be very good at role playing it. I don't think I would ever like create a character that actively tried to sabotage the story or actively tried to like get in the way of characters. Unless we were doing like an evil campaign or I don't know what the real term for it is, but like a mole in the party campaign where we have one character who's evil planted in there that the other characters don't know, and something like that. But like my, I guess, just personal style of role playing leads me to play more characters that are going to be agreeable and just kind of go along with the group. So probably more mechanical, if anything. Like looking at the spells for my Circle of the Shepherd Druid, like he's really just kind of like, yeah, I love animals, and I can heal some things. Like that's it. Like that's the thing. He can turn into a badger. That's about it.
Sometimes those mechanically challenging players are the crowd favorites, like Hogarth.
Exactly, man. You never know what your character can be or could do.
So as a mechanically challenging player, that's completely, obviously nobody's. I prefer characters that aren't min-max but stick to their. I try my best to keep it within the realm of within my story, but obviously I don't want to be a wizard that has -4 intelligence, because that's
right. Agreed.
stupid.
And that's agreed. And that's kind of what I meant too, with like getting the story first and then having the character build around it. Like I don't want my druid to have like 25 strength but like a -5 wisdom, right? Like I want him to be a druid. Like that's why he became a druid.
You want to be a
Yeah,
viable class. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I don't care if he's like I don't want him to min max. Like that's not how I play. But I also don't want him to be worthless at what he's doing. Like because then that just becomes unfun as a player where you're rolling stuff and constantly negating things from it simply because you have a character that rolled bad. Like, you're gonna put your stats into the stats that are supposed to be high for your class. Even if you're not min maxing. It's just like, okay, this makes sense. He's a druid. He should like have a high nature check or have a high animal handling check if he's a Circle of the Shepherd druid. Like that stuff makes sense to my character story.
Exactly. And so then,
What about you, Scott? How do you make yours?
my character?
Yeah.
Oh, I straight start with like what kind of class do I want to play in the campaign. So in this particular campaign that we're playing, apparently 4 of us all decided, fuck it, let's go wizard. So
Which actually worked really well with like the Groot backstory. It made it easy to pull you guys all together.
Yeah, and that's a huge positive. The negative is that one, we didn't all talk about it to begin with. We kind of all just did our own thing, so our party isn't really well balanced.
No, it is not.
Could very easily have a TPK because if you lose 2 of your DPS, it may hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to find a class that is, like I said, that has stuff that it can do. So like a wizard is going to have spells that it can cast. Like it can be defensive spells. It can be beneficial spells to members or just myself. I can even make my melee, if I wanted to be like a melee wizard, even though like I didn't want to play like an Eldritch Knight or anything like that. But if I did want to get into the mix with a weapon, I could do that because there's certain spells that can be cast to it. So I like the different things that a class like a wizard can do. Um, that being said, I also don't find the core classes from the player's handbook as interesting anymore. So I'm looking at like the D&D homebrew, or I'm looking at D&D Beyond to see what classes they've got in there to try to find something that seems interesting enough to play. And this is I think the first time I've played a wizard. Um, if I did if I die, I'm gonna probably switch back to either a core class or very similar to a core class. I know my next class what that's gonna be, and I'm starting to work out his backstory. Um, but I try to do class first and then build my story around it, which I feel like gives me a little bit more freedom in terms of how I want to do it, because then I know, like for example, as I was a wizard, that I can have all kinds of reasons for where I was and why I went there and did what I did,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to just being like, well, I am this person, so this is why I do it. Um, I just personally, I feel like it fits the narrative a little bit better.
How are you liking the wizard so far?
I like it when I'm able to do stuff. The ability to protect myself with shield is super helpful,
Mm-hmm.
but with wizards and casters in general, because of the fact that they're not, with martial classes, you generally get an extra attack, or you get to it, like you get to add like a primal swing or whatever they call it for the barbarian and stuff like that. Like there's different roles and stuff like that. With wizards and caster classes, is basically like I rolled a hit. If I hit, this is what the damage is. It's not like add this to this and make this to
Yeah.
this. It's just like, okay, so you take your roll and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, you're doing
spells.
you're doing less of the fun like dice math that you get to do as a martial character when you're like adding up all your pluses and damage and second attacks and action surge, third attack. Like
Mm-hmm.
I get what you mean. You have a higher payout for your action economy. Like all of your stuff goes boom.
Yeah, I get to have this array of types of spells, but
Mm-hmm.
they are cut and dry. It's like you hit, yep, this is what you do. You miss, this is what you do. So it's like that one roll. Whereas I remember when I was playing my monk, it's like, and I do this, oh, and I do this,
Mm-hmm.
and I do this,
Just
and you can just get that build up of adrenaline of like, oh, I did
yeah,
all this shit. That's so crazy.
yeah.
Oh,
Just doing dope Dope ass monk shit.
I crit, so I'll just multiply it by 2. That's fine. So
Yeah, but I think that, and I think that Wizards of the Coast did a good job in creating those, like the dice rolling economies of the different classes. Because as a fighter or a monk or a barbarian, like that's kind of how you're fighting. Is like, and then I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, and it's like if you're a wizard, you're kind of like, and I do this, like one big thing. You know what I mean? That gets everybody's attention. Shit.
I honestly hadn't thought about it that way. That's really well. That's a really good thought process about it. Is that like, yeah, a wizard would be like, yes, take this.
Yeah, I'm gonna twist my hand this way, and then death.
So then my next question about the character creation process is like, have you ever started to play a character and just be like, oof, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like this guy. Like, have you ever gotten so into it and be like, this guy kind of sucks?
But you can answer first because you've been the player more than I have.
At least for me, I've never said this guy sucks, and truly hated it. It's always been like this guy's really challenging, and I can't really do much damage. But then looking down the line and like planning what I would do in the future to get to be better, like realizing that they're weak right now, but they could be stronger later. Trying to think of like the worst character I've ever made.
So let me kind of reframe the question in that. So we kind of talked about it last week on Downstream, is that I'm starting to see and feel how my character is going to change as a person. Some of the things that he started out to do from the very beginning are not things that he's starting to find enjoyable and not really what he wants to do anymore. Have you started to get into that with like Fuzzy Knuckles? Like he's because in theory they're all agent, they can be changed. Like right, like his Fuzzy Knuckles motive is like I'm a team player. Like my crewmates mean the world to me. But maybe he starts to feel differently as he encounters more people, and maybe that like some crewmates maybe aren't worth saving, and maybe I'll let that guy go, or maybe that it's more, you know what I mean, as the character changes. Have you started to feel that way?
Yeah, so actually that's a really interesting way to phrase that, because I can answer that in two parts, because it kind of felt like a two-parted question to me in the way that my mind was thinking. And that like the way that I typically pick those ideals is that I try to pick them in ways that I think would just not cause problems. Because like we're all just trying to do it to have fun, and I don't want to pick the one that's like, I'll sacrifice my party if it means I can gain 5 more gold. Like nobody wants to play with that guy when we're just playing to have fun and like playing as a group. So typically I pick things for like my bonds and ideals. Like I know it kind of goes against what I was saying earlier about creating a backstory, but that's kind of a minor part of a backstory. That's more of like his future personality. So I'll try to pick ones that are more easygoing for how I will behave in the future. But at the same, like to answer what I felt was the second part of your question, there definitely is people that my character, and I keep track of it, like who he feels more of a bond to. And this past example, or this past session, is a perfect example of that. Like Charlie's character, my guy hated him at the beginning. He thought he was a big dumb Goliath and just was like a dock worker he didn't want to do anything with. But then after his boat was gone, his character was the only guy that came and comforted me. So then he was like, okay, we're cool now, and I'm going to be there for you, because he doesn't really know everybody else in the party all that well. And then at the tavern, you know, my guy didn't want to cause any trouble. He went out to talk to Bruce after Bruce pointed out that the guy was looking at him shady, and was just wanted to talk to him and try to figure out a way that they could get information out. And then Bruce went in and punched him in the face, and my guy was like, all right, I guess we're doing this, because he did put that bond above anything else. And like knowing that it probably would have hindered the party, but at that point in time, Bruce was who he was most bonded with.
So let me interject here and ask a question, and it may come across pointed, but that's the idea. So you said that you felt bonded to Bruce, and that at that point it's like, okay, this is what we're doing. I've got to protect my boy. But in that instance, you hid under a table. You then were trying to climb on the rafters to get the most mechanical advantage in that situation. So as you are playing that character, do you find it challenging to be able to say that kind of stuff? Because like you said, your guy is not designed to get hit. He's stealthy. He's gonna try to hide first to get the best advantage, but that kind of directly conflicts with the idea of I'm going in, I got to protect this guy. Or am I misinterpreting how your character is? His ideal is that I'm gonna go help my guy, but at the same time I'm also gonna do it stealthily and get there when I get there.
He was helping him in the way that he can. He knows that he's not going to run in fist swinging to a guy with a great sword when he's only got a rapier and he's a little kitty cat. Like, he knows that if he just runs in, he's going to die, and then he's going to be of no purpose. Like, in that example, he knew that Bruce would be able to withstand a hit or two. Plus, we had all the other people in there. Like, if let's say it was Bruce or whatever party member I was bonded with got jumped, then yeah, he would just take out his sword and start stabbing. But he saw the advantage that our party had, so he used his skills to try to get an even bigger advantage, knowing that we had the upper hand.
So his ideal isn't necessarily I will run in at any fight that anybody attacks my crewmate. It's I will aid my crewmate because they mean everything to me, but I'm going to do it tactically. So it's not reckless, it's more calculated.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what so when you were describing it in the game and afterwards and stuff like that, I always interpreted it that you were not reckless about it, but you were not afraid to like just run in, just start swinging. So that makes it actually a little bit more. It makes a lot more sense as to why you played it the way that you did.
Yeah, he doesn't just do things blindly. I mean, he comes off. I need to look up if my guy actually is really stupid. I know he's positive in intelligence and positive.
I need to look up to see if my guy really is stupid.
But I've always been playing him because he's positive in intelligence and wisdom. That he doesn't just stupidly does things. Like, he's always thinking and calculating how to get to his advantage. Because I mean, he grew up as basically a stowaway, like a cat on a ship with nothing. So his whole life has always been calculated moves to how he can get his advantage, whether that's by being sneaky or by using his tongue by using a silver tongue to try to get like a one up on somebody. Everything he does is calculated.
Gotcha. So like I said, the way that I interpreted the description and stuff like that is kind of like how we would all do for each other. Is that like if I saw somebody attacking you, regardless, like it's drop what you're doing, you're fucking in the fray, versus well, hold on, let me go try to run around and hide behind this so he doesn't see me and then jump on him. You know what I mean? So that's how I was interpreting his ideal, and that was a misinterpretation on my part versus being incorrectly played.
I mean, he was in his mind, he was right in it. Like, but he's just not. He's a cat. He's not going to run in with a hammer swinging. All of his instincts say to get in the shadows and then get the advantage and then kill in one swift motion. Like, he was doing exactly what he thought was best, and in his mind, he was right in the fray. That's not what he would want to do at all. If it was up to him, he would not be fighting in that situation.
Okay. What about you, Chris? When it comes to characters that you play and or as NPCs and stuff that you like to see, do you prefer seeing the chaotic players, or do you like to see the chess tactical players moving their players around to get the best advantage?
I actually kind of like both. I think that having a party that's a mix of like, little chaos goblins as well as, the chess players, I think that that's a good thing to have, because like when you have those characters that are just chaotic, like I don't know what Bruce's traditional alignment would be, if you want to call it that. But I love the way that he just kind of goes and does things because it helps keep the story moving and it forces people to think on their feet instead of just like not necessarily metagaming, but just like playing intelligently. You know what I mean? Like I think it keeps folks from going down that rabbit hole of like, okay, let's all collaboratively come up with this plan that's going to be kind of foolproof, and we'll just sit here and discuss it for a while and RP our way through it until we have something we like. And then you have characters like Bruce that are like, I go in and I do this thing. And then everyone just has to react to that. So I think it's cool to have the mix of both in order to keep the story moving along. In fact, I think it's necessary to have both, so you keep the story moving along. If you have all chess players, then you end up with a game of chess, which can be fun, but is going to take a long time to play out. If you have a bunch of chaos goblins, then, well, chaos ensues.
Yeah, and the way Bruce handled that in the last episode, I absolutely loved because it moved things forward and it was something that he would absolutely do. So it was great. The only thing that I wanted to find out from you all as well is when when does personal story and background affect the collaborative storytelling, the collaborative group, right? So Bruce going in and smashing a guy with the hammer because his backstory and what he wants to accomplish for his character may or may not align with what the group in the story does. At what point do you think it starts to be a problem for a group? Not necessarily our group, but just in general.
I don't think it ever becomes a problem until it's a problem, if that makes sense. Like characters acting in individual paths can really help move the story along. Like you guys don't know who that NPC was. You don't know his name. You don't know what their affiliation with, the Starlings is, or even if they are affiliated with them. Who knows if you'll see him again? Like you might have just made a really powerful enemy. Like you don't know what Bruce's actions will hold. So I think that it's actually good sometimes when players do things that might not be in line with like what the group was trying to do, and not necessarily even for like a chaotic like I just want to go watch the world burn, but instead with an actual like this is what my character would do. I'm going to go fuck shit up. I'm pissed off. This guy's been giving me fucking attitude, staring at me from across the bar, like a very longshoreman, dock worker thing to do. Like, who's this guy staring at me? What, you think you're better than me? Go over there and start swinging. Like, I could totally see that happening. And it did throw a huge wrench in y'all's plans for what I think the goal was of going to the end of the road tavern and trying to find information out about this elusive group.
Let's be
And
clear.
it's
I threw a
instead going
wrench.
for it.
I threw a wrench in those
Who,
plans by not
whose
putting up on
idea was it?
to attack the guy.
No, to go to the inn.
That was mine because I
Okay.
wanted to try to get a little bit of information.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the table was split. I know I wanted to go check it out because I knew that Milia's kids or
Mm-hmm.
mother was murdered, and it's like that's what I was kind of also alluding to as well, is like every character has its reason for being, right? Like why do they exist? Like why is Fuzzy Knuckles in Lund? Why is Lomar in Lund? And if I know if my speaking personally, like if a family member or a friend of mine was murdered, that like I wouldn't be like, oh, okay, well now I'm gonna go check out the Feywild, so
Mm-hmm.
not gonna resolve why my family was fucking murdered. Like I would want to explore and figure that out. So that kind of creates a a dissonance, if you will. Like, okay, so I as Milia have to now go too far to have this person's reason for existence play out, and then we're gonna go to the Feywild. Meanwhile, I'm not getting any resolution to why my losses, and so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go to, even though she wasn't there, but I kind of wanted to check that out and see if we could kind of open or undo that fog of war a little bit, so then that way we can kind of not metagame it for her, but also say, hey, we're also in this area, so then that way we empathize with you. Let's figure out what happened to your family, because that's
Mm-hmm.
important too.
Well, two things to keep in mind. One is that from the time you guys left Art and Hammerbeard and had originally decided to go straight over to Taran to see what was going on with Milia's mother and a couple of other things, like really only like 2 hours have passed because you guys left the keep, turned right, walked straight into the bar, and then got into a massive bar fight at a thieves guild or at a thieves den. So not much time has passed. So you could still like try to persuade her when she's there, because one of the downsides to Morgan not being able to play last week because she was working with, so obviously it's not a big deal or anything like that. Like she wasn't there to advocate for her character, and even though we had people that were playing her or speaking for her, it was really just like if she was asked a direct question, like we didn't want to act for her, even if we felt comfortable with her, like the knowledge of her character or backstory and stuff like that. Like you don't want to take that agency away from a player making major decisions for them or for the party.
Sure.
And so I think everyone was like, we'll just kind of wait till she comes back to see what's up.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens on Wednesday. Maybe Amelia's character is going to put her foot down and say, no, we're not going to, fair. We're not going to drop a letter off. Like my mom's missing is how I think she would say it.
Yeah, you suck
And then
with
it'll
voices,
just be
apparently.
it. That's funny. So yeah, who knows? Who knows what's gonna happen, man? You guys are only in, day 3 of the actual calendar, maybe day 4 at this point. So we're kind of right now slowly moving because the story hasn't really picked up yet. Where you're covering, massive distances. Like you guys have never, as the party, you guys have not traveled more than 1 mile outside of Lund yet. Like that's how close to the town you have stayed over the course of our first 6 episodes, which is fine. I don't care. Like I personally wouldn't care if like we did an entire campaign inside of a city. Like it doesn't matter. You don't have to travel the world to be, first or low level adventurers. Maybe you're just city heroes. Anyways, sorry, tangents.
Can I go back to answer Scott's question from a minute ago about when, at least my view on it, when like somebody, like when people acting in character might affect things?
Yeah, go for it, man.
Like for me personally, it's never, as long as somebody's acting in their character, I love it. Like exactly what you were saying, what Charlie was doing or what Bruce was doing, I loved it. Like because it was what his character would do. The only time I hate it is when it's like somebody, I don't know, for lack of a better term, just trolling, like not trying to do anything to progress the story, not trying to be a character, but it's just like, I'm just gonna fuck this up just to fuck this up. And it doesn't character at all, and it's just like really aggravating. That's the only time that I hate when people do something out of the ordinary.
Well, and I think that's where, as like the DM, that's my job to see that. And depending on the type of game we're running, like if we were just running a pure comedy game where the whole point was just to, see what type of antics your characters can get to, then maybe you let that shit go. But no, I agree. In a setting like the campaign we have, where you guys are taking it seriously and there's character development and backstory that is good, for lack of a more descriptive term, it's the DM's job to be like, oh yeah, you go over there and you do this stupid fucking thing with it trolling around, just wasting people's time. Cool. The city guard sees you do this thing and is fucking pissed at you, and you just happen to be walking past like the grand champion of, the Temple's Verdict, this massive tournament held in town every day, and Sir Jorah the One Eye is fucking pissed at you, so he takes out his hammer and hits you in the face and kills you instantly. Like shit could get real funny real fast if people want to mess around. Like the world that you're living in is very dangerous all of a sudden. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. I guess that's true. Yeah, like as long as the DM controls that, then it's really not a problem.
So with my mentality, I absolutely love when characters or players play their character, how their character would be. Bruce smashing the guy in the face, love it. Fuzzy Knuckles, now that I know that your ideal tends to be more on the like I'm gonna help but be tactical, as opposed to like I'm gonna fucking I'm in, doesn't matter what, I'm all in, ride or die. I love that. I'm The thing that I get concerned about is when players have reasons for existence that take them away. For example, if a player was like, well, my guy's got to get to, I don't know, the further islands or anything like that, but my guy's got to get out to sea because I want to go travel the world and the only thing I want to do is get to the next ship port so I can get out on a boat. We need to go to the next boat. That's where it causes issue with me is that, you know, collectively we're all in it together, and that's part of the whole idea behind D&D is that we all buy into the fact that we're a group, even though we all have our backgrounds. Those dictate kind of where we come from and what we think and how we make those decisions, but they're not why we exist, if that makes sense.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it definitely does.
background of wanting to I mean, truth be told, if my guy found out that the entire HMS Jackie Daytona was not dead, and the ship was there and it just set out to sea, I would really have to evaluate where his loyalties lied at that point. Like, if he would get back aboard what his entire life was and what he had known for 12 years versus stay with the people he's known for, 4 days. And or as a one-off character, you got dropped off on an island and you're trying to get back to your crewmates. That could be like a really cool guest role. Like, I think that kind of personality plays its role, and that was something that I was debating during the first few sessions. Thankfully, the HMS Jackie Daytona currently is destroyed, so I didn't have to make that decision.
Nobody said that it was destroyed.
It's just out at sea.
Well, in his mind, it's destroyed.
Fair enough.
If it comes back, it would really have to be a decision my guy would have to make based on what his bonds were at that time.
Okay, so you're saying that sometimes characters will leave or make their decisions and go their own way, which happens, and then you either roll up another character or you.
Yeah, I don't know, the way that I've always viewed it, and I don't know if this is wrong or if it's the way that I view it, but it's not a set group of people on one specific quest. It's a group of people writing a book together.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have a book with characters that come and go, and like the Chronicles of Narnia. It's the story. It's the book about the world, not about Peter and Edward and Susan and Lucy. It's a book about the world, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. That's kind of how I always describe it when I talk to people. Is like it's a group of people, essentially just telling a story, and the only times, like Chris had mentioned earlier, is that like when people start getting like, well, I'm gonna go murder this family because I'm chaotic evil and I just want to kill people and I want to do everything that's wrong. Like, you also then have to take a look as a group as like, why would we be with this person, right? Like, I as a person would never be around that group of people, so why would my character be? Like, people are, whether you're in a fantasy game or you're in the real world, like, people are going to also kind of act the same way. Like, I'm not going to surround myself with shitbags as Lomar just because 5 people in our group want to play shitbags.
Exactly.
That's not something that he would do. So why would that person continue to travel around and stuff like that? So, like I said, I was just more curious about how your all's take is on characters who break the mold and pivot from what the group is doing.
Yeah, I think too that it's important to remember, like, I think you had said something a few minutes ago about it being like a group that's come together to do things. Like, I actually would take the opposite view, that it's a bunch of individuals who somehow get lumped together. But to kind of piggyback on what Andrew was saying, like with his character, like, you've at this point in our campaign, to use an example, you've only known each other for 4 days. Like, people have entire lives outside of what happened in these 4 days. And yeah, you guys have been through a lot, so those bonds of like battle or whatever you want to call them are there. But it's very interesting to hear Spud say that if he saw the HMS Jackie Daytona, that he would have to make a very compelling decision about what his character would do.
I love that.
Because that would be a very cool story. If all of a sudden Fuzzy Knuckles sees his ship in port somewhere, and what that would mean. Does Fuzzy Knuckles stick around? Does he leave? Like, I think that'd be really cool. And I think as a player, if it was me on the other end of it, I think it would be a lot of fun to have to role play that out and figure out, what would my character do? Like, it would make sense for him to go back to the ship, but does he want to leave his new friends? Like, who knows? That's the thing to find out.
I mean, from my perspective, just as a very quick once over, I don't know how it would feel in the moment, but if it was just the ship and nobody he knew on the ship, he would stick with the people that he knows. But if it's, oh, hey, Mr. Man. But if it's
Man.
but if it's like his entire crew, everybody that he knew, and like the squid guy from 2 episodes ago is on there, then that might change things. Maybe he would convince them. It really depends on when it happens and what the circumstances are in that situation. But it is something that was has been in the back of my mind, that if it does show up, what would he do? Because it's not, like I said, I don't play it as I'm an adventurer in this group and we're going to go beat the big bad end guy. I play it as I'm a character in the story and what would my character do?
Which I can really appreciate. And to be fair, I actually don't mind both ways of people playing that. I think it's cool that you are the type of player that would look at the HMS Jackie Daytona with all of your old shipmates and be like, turn to this group of people that you've gone through some crazy shit with and be like, well, it was fun while it lasted. See you guys in the next town, and then just like hop on the ship and see you later. Like, that would be really cool. And it'd be a really cool story, like for that all to unfold. And at the same time, I'm okay with characters being like having really big, elaborate backstories with lots of twists and turns that build their character into what they are, and them getting into the party and just being like, all right, this is my new place. Like, I'm gonna go with these people and go do everything that they want to do because that's what I'm gonna do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want to stop playing Fuzzy Knuckles. I want to keep playing him with the group. But if the ship comes back, he lived on that for 12, 13 years. That's his home.
Yeah. Nah, man, I hear you. I think it's safe to say that if the HMS Jackie Daytona is still out there in the world, that you will definitely see it again. But that's an if.
I love that aspect of the character potentially leaving because that's what his character do. Any role playing or character development such as that, I think, is just spot on. So, well, we've been doing this for an hour now, boys. So, I've kind of wrapped up the questions that I had. If you guys want to talk about anything, we can keep throwing topics at each other and chatting. But that was the Downstream subject in story for tonight. So, what do you guys got? Chris, as a DM, what are you seeing and hoping that you see more of from us as players?
Shoot, man. Right now, nothing. Like, I'm really liking how players are doing everything. Like I kind of mentioned at the start of the show, like those big 3 things. Just excited to see players kind of peeling back the layers of who they are as characters, and hopefully going forward, just to try to answer the question, I think the only thing that would, and not even wanting to see it, but just I hope as a DM story-wise that we see it, is for you guys to start picking up, or not even picking up's not the right phrase, experiencing and going through the bigger parts of the story, just so that you can see them and do all that stuff. But at the same time, like, I'm really enjoying the story that we're collectively creating because I like it so far. Like, I went back and watched episode 6 and was laughing, like, watching it, even though I lived that experience and watched myself and my friends play D&D, and I already knew what was going to happen. I still found myself laughing at Charlie coming out of the restroom and being like, all right, let's go. And your question to him, like, isn't it summer? Was your shit that hot? Like, I'm just dying, man. I've loved every part of it, man. It's fun to go back and watch that. And yeah, just looking forward to some more, I guess you can call them emotional episodes where players really dive into their backstories. You guys start to feel comfortable with one another in the world and in the party, where you kind of expose that vulnerable side, for lack of a better phrase. I think that'll lead to some cool moments.
What about you, Fuzzy? What are you hoping to happen to Fuzzy Knuckles or happen in the story if you were to?
Well, I was sort of point out Chris's thing was he really likes what we're doing, but he really wishes that we would pick up on some of the clues that he's been dropping.
No. So far, you guys have actually picked up on all of them. No, you picked up on all the most of the clues. Maybe not all of them, but you've picked up on most of them.
You guys picked up on all of them. You picked up on most of them. You guys picked up on some. You picked up on a couple.
You picked up on one thing. No. You guys have picked up on the clues. That's definitely not what I meant.
Like that meant we picked up on all 4 clues. I actually dropped 8,000 clues,
yeah,
but
I had 200. Yeah, that's no. You guys have definitely been picking up on the right stuff as players, and more just I'm excited to see the story unfold and to see how you guys, react to it, see if you enjoy it, all that fun stuff.
Well, yeah, for me, it's just in terms of like what I hope to get out of it. I just like people. I don't know. Just, I guess reiterating it, writing a story together, and not being. My biggest fear is people finding somebody else annoying if they're genuinely committing to a character. Because I know me and Milia can be a bit of a handful, but we're, at least in my view, we're not like trying to be annoying. And that's always my biggest fear, is just like trying to, if people find you annoying, so as long as it's, people really enjoying writing a story together and knowing that there's going to be ups and downs, that's all I care about. And just like getting together and having fun, going through the story that Chris writes, navigating what that genius brain comes up with and figuring out what he's trying to get us to do, and then doing a bit of improv and forcing him to create something new. It's just really, I don't know, comedic and dramatic storytelling, improv, all lumped into one. And I don't know, as cheesy as it sounds, as long as everybody's having fun, then that's all I want.
Yeah, same. That's the most important part of it.
Yeah, I would hope that, especially since we're all a group of friends, that none of us are finding each other annoying or being judgmental or critical of that kind of stuff. Because also, that is also another thing of like especially when doing voices and stuff like that, is if you're in your head already about like, oh, I hope they're already not like, I hope they're not finding me annoying. Oh God, what?
Like, it makes it more difficult.
It makes it way more difficult. It also makes it way more difficult to even get into character and play characters. Like if you're thinking about whether or not other people are going to be accepting of it, like that would suck. And I hope that that's not how anybody feels at our table.
Yeah, I hope not either, because I thoroughly enjoy everybody's characters. They're awesome. I love the voices that people do, the different like energy levels that people bring to the table for their characters. Like, I like it. It's a great little band of misfits that is fitting together very well with one another.
So, well, all right, guys. That's gonna be it for me, unless there was anything that you guys specifically wanted to talk about.
No, I mean, I think we will stick to that. I mean, obviously, we could all sit here and talk all night long about, high fantasy and D&D and everything in between.
I could keep going for hours.
That's what I'm saying. So I think that sticking to the 1 hour-ish kind of policy that we had set out is a good plan, just so that we can, keep it short, or else this really quickly turns into a 10-hour podcast that we'd have to break into episodes.
Mm-hmm. Start getting into high fantasy and magic use and.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can break all that down.
Thing?
Yeah, right.
I think we should just close out with an ad break,
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead. Who's sponsored by DM?
No, hold on a second. Give me un momento. And, all right, Spud, you ready?
Yep.
All right, so tonight's episode is actually sponsored by one of the inns in the town of Fair, called the Wary Weasel. Take it away.
The Wary Weasel, where you weep away your weary eyes. Come in and take a rest here at the Wary Weasel.
Nice.
When you are tired from slinking around in the barrels outside of town, then come in and rest your brown. That's fucking weird. On the Wary Weasel's pillow ground. We don't have beds. We have pillows on the ground.
So when you say rest your, I heard brown.
Yeah,
I heard
butthole.
rest your brow. Yep, rest your butthole.
Is that a reference to a butthole?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
just a word that came to mind that rhymed, and I decided to stick with it.
It was
Gotcha.
solid. Well, I set you up for failure there because I definitely said wary instead of weary, and then I was like, well, he's gonna go with it, so here we go.
Anyway, so remember everybody, Wednesday night we'll be streaming as opposed to Friday. Tune in and see what antics and story we open up on Wednesday night's stream, and then we'll also that night go over what our schedule's going to be for the rest of August because it is a really fucky schedule. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, everybody.